Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Ben. I'm a product manager here at Redgate Software. I've been here about 7 years now. The bulk of that time's been working on performance optimization tools for SQL Server and .NET, which for the last couple of years has been entirely focused around SQL Monitor.
And I'm Kathi Kellenberger. I'm the editor of SimpleTalk, but I spent quite a bit of time as a database administrator, both as a full-time job and as a consultant for several customers. And I love being a DBA because you never get bored and there's always something new to learn.
So today we're going to be talking about how a great DBA manages their day. We're going to be talking about some of the habits that make them great at their job. We're also going to be talking about some of the capabilities in the newest version of SQL Monitor that can help you as a DBA have fewer of those bad days and make those good days a little bit better as well. So, Kathi, what does a great day look like for you?
Well, I like to have a plan for the day, a list of things that I'd like to accomplish. Unfortunately, a lot of things can happen that are unexpected. For example, there might be some kind of an issue that I have to troubleshoot. There might be a lot of those drive-by requests, unexpected requests. But generally, I want to be proactive. I don't want to spend my time working on things that are considered interruptions.
You know, it's those random requests that they're the real killer, right? Mm-hmm. So I speak to DBAs all the time who can't spend 30 minutes at their desk getting something useful done before someone rocks up and has a request. You know, it might be, sometimes it's developers, sometimes it's end users who've got a problem, sometimes it's even managers who don't know how to stay away. But there are a lot of people that know where you sit, right? And people show up and they want things.
Yeah, and the way I managed it is that, well, first of all, you have to have your manager help you kind of figure out what things you should be working on and what things can be put off. You know, that's important. But I also decided that if I was asked to do something 2 times, chances are I would be asked to do it a 3rd time and a 4th time. So I just start thinking about automating it. So that gave me time to work on projects that I needed to work on, such as, for example, we had a lot of software that was third-party software that we had to upgrade, and a lot of times SQL Server would be involved in those upgrades. And you know, we had to set up test environments, and the biggest thing was whenever we merged with another firm and we had to merge some of the databases when we were running the same software or figure out how to translate the data from similar software. Of course, we add, you know, experts to help us with that, but still there was a lot of work for me to do. So I worked with lots of third-party products, but a lot of database administrators are part of an agile environment where they're developing software and they have to spend time on the DevOps piece of it, making sure that those database changes get rolled out correctly and on time. So, you know, it's important, no matter what you're doing, you've got to get a handle on it so you can take care of the things that come up as well as be proactive.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say though about making that switch from being in that kind of continual firefighting mode where you're always battling the next issue that's coming around into a more proactive way of thinking about the world. And it's something I hear from DBAs continually is just, I mean, it's almost the #1 priority, and not just DBAs, but it's for it's managers too who want this of the DBAs that are working for them. You know, if I were to take 2 DBAs, both who've got a really great technical knowledge of SQL Server, but where you've got one who's always in that firefighting mode, whilst you have a second who's able to take a step back, really get a better handle on the environment and think about the bigger picture of what's going on. For me, that's one of the key things that separates out a junior DBA from a really exceptional DBA. I mean, how do you make that transition? That's a hard thing to do, right?
It is hard. What I like to do is set aside time every morning to take a look at the overall health. I'm hoping that I can, you know, look at some of these things while they're easy to solve before they become really big problems. You know, it's really all about planning my time.
So it's, okay, planning. Okay, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that we hear quite often from users of SQL Monitor. You know, they've got some kind of set of things that they want to go understand, but They end up using essentially a series of checklists. You know, they manage to free up time for themselves. I mean, do you kind of recognise that pattern of kind of looking at essentially checklists?
Yeah, checklists are good. Just however you do it, it's just really good to understand what's coming up and dealing with it before it becomes a big problem.
Yeah. And one of the ways that we've tried to help here is a new way of thinking about the alerts that you might see.
Cool.
So this is an inbox that you might see in SQL Monitor. And people will often see an inbox like this where you have dozens or maybe even hundreds of alerts to go take a look at. And people that are trying to understand what sort of issues are going to come up, not just today that's on fire, but things that might come and bite you in the next week or month, will look at these kinds of things. And we can scroll along these really forever. I mean, there are different types of alerts here with different severities raised against different servers. And really, what we need to do is understand not just, hey, what are all of the things that are going on, but what are the most important ones that are likely to cause me issues at some point in the future. So what we've done is build what we're calling the grouped alert inbox. So we just switch into this new mode, and we're taking what was around 100 events that have happened, and we're condensing those down by grouping those together, which allows you to pick out the most important ones. So whereas before we had all of those different types of alerts raised on different servers, we've now just got a group of a few. You can see here at the top there are a couple. One was raised 14 times, one was raised 28 times. So I can go click through on this one, and I can go and look at the details of that alert to take a closer look at what's causing that one. But it means that instead of just having to skim through around 100 and really struggle to work out what's going to matter, instead of that, I get to say, well, there are all these ones down here that have happened once each. Maybe I don't really care about those, but this one up here, without having to even inspect that one myself, or inspect 28 of those myself, I'm very quickly able to say, hey, this one looks like it's recurring over and over again. Maybe I want to go look at that. Or if it's not actually causing you an issue at all, maybe I want to go and configure that and suppress that alert in the future so that I avoid the danger of ever being woken up by that, because I don't want that to happen.
Yeah, that is really cool. And I can imagine using this and getting an idea about what's coming up, what problems I'm going to have to deal with, you know, in a week or a month's time, and solve them while they're still easy before people complain.
It's exactly for that. Yeah. And it's also about being able to take that more proactive look and saying, hey, I've got a spare day on my hands next week. I'm going to want to take some kind of action that improves the environment as a whole. And not just kind of scattergun randomly, pick a random thing and try and fix it and make an improvement, but really try and deploy my limited capacity to make improvements in as directed a way as I can, and that's what we're trying to let you do with this.
Yeah, I like this idea, but I haven't seen a DBA yet that had a spare day on his hands.
Okay, yeah, so that's fair. But you know, one day a DBA somewhere in the world is going to have some spare time on their hands, and they're going to, and then this is going to be super useful, right?
Yes, definitely.
So I mean, when you're doing that kind of check, what sort of things are you looking for?
Oh, there's so many things, and it's really going to depend on the environment of that particular shop. One of most important things is job status. So, for example, where I used to work, certain jobs failed. It was going to affect the business. So I needed to know that and take care of it right away, really before the users got to work. And how I accomplished that was by creating a job that sent me the statuses of it, just collected everything and sent me one email, and I read it before I got out of bed. And that told me whether I could go ahead and get up and get ready to go to work, or I had to get online and solve some things before I got there.
Ah, got it. What other sorts of things did you look at?
Oh, there's so many things. Of course, backups and restores, that's just DBA 101, right?
Sure.
And, you know, I've noticed that some DBAs will spend time looking at all the settings and looking at all the statuses and reading all the error logs on a daily basis. And of course, those things are really, really important. But you know, I really think that's where a monitoring tool could help. Have we got anything that can help with that?
I mean, I couldn't agree more. Right? So DBAs should not be spending their time on that sort of thing. Right? So there are, I mean, you could spend time on dozens of those sorts of checks over and over again. But I mean, if nothing else, life is too short, and these things are really, I mean, these are kind of mundane. The role of a monitoring tool, in my view, is at least in part, to be doing those kinds of repetitive actions for you. So they go and do those checks on your behalf, and all you need to do is bring your intelligence as a DBA to the table and interpret that data to understand, hey, does this stuff matter or does it not? And if nothing else, DBAs are really expensive, right? I mean, so you don't want to be spending that kind of expensive time on that kind of really mundane, repetitive activity. You want to be doing the sorts of activities that really add value to your businesses.
Yeah, I kind of like that DBAs are expensive. I don't mind making a lot of money, but DBAs are highly skilled and they are hard to come by. So you want to make sure that their time is used as wisely as possible. One of the things that I'm confused about is how a database administrator can keep up with storage. How can they really pay attention to when database files are filling up or when the file itself is going to fill up the drive? I've seen so many places that causes problem day in and day out. Is there anything that we can do to help that?
What a coincidence, you should ask that. And so this is something that we hear from DBAs all the time, is that they're responsible for managing not just the environment, but also to think about the storage needs that they have and to plan for the future.
Okay.
And SQL Monitor's always helped with those aspects of the role. So we have data about disk usage, and we'll certainly tell you about things like disks running out of space over time, and help you take action on those problems before they bring a system down, which is not going to be good. But there's a different aspect which is around considering the amounts of data that individual databases are using and understanding those growth patterns over time, and then being able to work with the business owners for those databases to understand the growth and capacity needs that are reaching into the future. So we actually have a new capability in SQL Monitor, which is possibly what you're alluding to. So this is what we've been calling data file usage information. So what we're showing on this graph here is the volume of data which is in a database. In fact, not a database, but an individual database file. We look down at that level. And you can see this black line is showing the volume of data within the file, while the blue line is showing the size of that file. So what you see is the data volume grows, and then it hit an auto-grow threshold, and the size of the file increased, and you see that pattern happening there. Now, if you have auto-grow enabled, then you won't have any hard problems in the as those files resize themselves. But what you are likely to encounter is performance degradation if those files resize themselves during business hours. So if you have that that file grow at that point, then you end up with some period of time when performance is not going to be optimal. And you really want to be proactively managing the sizes of those files and growing them in non-core hours. Maybe you do it on a Sunday afternoon or something like that. So what SQL Monitor is now able to do is actually take this historical trend data about how much data there's been available and project it forwards in time. So we're actually predicting, based off your past trends, what's likely to happen in the future. And then SQL Monitor can tell you, hey, based on past growth rates, it looks like you're going to run out of capacity in this file in 2 weeks' time, for example. In the case that you have auto-grow enabled, then you save yourself some problems around performance. In the case auto-grow isn't enabled, then you potentially save yourself a really damaging incident where I mean, everything's going to go wrong if space runs out in that file and it's unable to grow itself. So it's doing this not just for individual database files, but it's doing this for every file on every database, on every instance across your entire environment. So particularly when you're managing, I mean, if you're managing dozens or hundreds, even thousands of servers, being able to have this automatically looked at for you predictively is something that we think is going to really help people manage that.
Yeah, I really love this, and I think it's going to help a lot of database administrators. For one thing, we hate getting those 2 a.m. calls because of problems like this, and we really hate getting interrupted when we're trying to do project work in the middle of the day, and we get interrupted, with this type of problem. And I really like the predictive. I'm thinking that that's going to help. You might suddenly find out one day you need more space. Well, it'd be really nice if you could tell that SAN administrator a week before you need it or a month before you need it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about being able to spend more time on that project work and having to spend less time dropping that because either you got woken up in the middle of the night and you need to recover, or because you've just had to take a chunk of time out of your day to put out the fire.
So every day really isn't smooth for me.
You made it sound like every day was so perfectly well planned.
I try to. That's what I aspire to. So I always try to be proactive. I try to stay on top of things, but there's always some kind of surprise that happens.
Sure. I mean, what sort of things are we talking about?
Let me tell you about the worst thing that happened. I had 10 failover clustered instances on 4 nodes that were sitting on a SAN, obviously. And one day somebody switched off the SAN accidentally. So now all of a sudden my phone's ringing off the hook. My instances are just kind of going round robin trying to come up on one of the nodes. And it was terrible. And there was nothing really I could do except answer the phone and apologize and let the customers know what was going on. So yeah, it was terrible.
That does not sound like a good day for you. So personally, I love hearing about this sort of story because it's happening to you and not me, and that's kind of cool. Yeah, that doesn't sound great though.
It wasn't, because all I could do was wait for the SAN team to get the SAN figured out, and then of course I needed to, go ahead and get things going.
So I guess that sometimes you can actually do something about it.
Right. So preferably, if there is a problem, I don't want problems, but preferably if it's something that I can take care of, I feel better at that. An example. Recently, some code was rolled out, and unfortunately, there was a little function or a little procedure in .NET with the transaction, and in the error handling, the developer had forgot to put the rollback. So that was deployed, and then what happened was when that code aired out, that left the transaction open. So you can imagine the problems we had. It ended up affecting the overnight jobs. It ended up affecting other, customers trying to connect in. It was really a nightmare. But the fact that we had a monitoring solution in place allowed us to figure out what was causing the problem, and understand exactly where it was coming from. And luckily, we were able to, at that point, kill that process or kill that connection, but the developers were able to get a patch out within a day or so to fix it.
Yeah. I mean, monitoring or not in place, that's still super painful. Right? And there were organizations for which that kind of downtime, even for relatively short periods of time, can cost millions of dollars, whether that's in terms of directly lost business themselves, or whether that's in terms of fines related to breaching SLAs. That's super painful. And when that happens, someone's going to be complaining about it. It's astonishing how fast a group of managers are standing behind your shoulder yelling at you about that.
Right. I really love being a DBA, but those kind of situations, that's the bad part of the job.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Hey, is there anything that SQL Monitor can do to help a situation like this?
And so that's been a really big focus of ours over the last year, really. Okay. Is recognizing that in that kind of situation where everything's on fire and time is money and people are yelling at you to get this issue fixed now, everything you're doing is about trying to understand the cause of that problem faster. So we've got a whole host of new capabilities that aim to help with exactly that. So you actually mentioned that idea of having made a deployment and then processes started taking a long time. And we've always shown you information in SQL Monitor about expensive processes, expensive queries that are running. We have just one of those here, so you can see the number of times that has run. We're also showing you information about CPU usage and disk activity, so those costs associated with that query. And we've always also shown you weight information to do with that. But the newest version of SQL Monitor goes quite a lot further. And so it also shows you the historical context of that query. One thing that really commonly happens is you get a call from an end user saying, hey, my report is running slowly. And the reaction is sometimes to think, oh no, something's going wrong, I need to go fix that report. But what you don't know is that actually that report has been running slow for the last 4 years, and it's just that Bob woke up on the wrong side of bed this morning, and today is the day that he's chosen to give you a call about it. And so instead of spending ages going down blind alleys and investigating what's going on, you need to understand, is this actually normal behavior or not? So here we're looking at the performance of that query over time. Now in blue you're seeing the average duration of that. We can also look at the average cost of disk access, average CPU usage over time. And we'll see here that there's a spike around 2 a.m. today. So this query gets executed a lot. And it's typically just executing incredibly quickly, but there's a spike around 2 a.m. If we look at the historical trending information here, we see actually over the last 14 days of data, that has it spiked around 2 a.m. every single day. And it turns out this is just because there's a job that runs at 2 a.m. and it causes some contention, and that causes that query to run slowly. Now, if we were to have responded to the an initial complaint about something running slowly, we might have spent quite a lot of time trying to understand a slow query, perhaps a much slower one than this. Yeah. You also mentioned blocking processes. That there was that deployment, and SQL Monitor again has always been able to alert you to processes that are blocking. But now we go a step further by letting you historically drill into any blocking that was occurring. So we've got a period of time selected here, which was from earlier, actually that was yesterday. And I can look at any of these processes that were blocking. I can see what application was running them as well as the host they were running from. But I can then click through that, and I can see this tree of blocking. So I can very quickly understand how these processes were blocking each other at any point in time in the past. Now, interesting the point you made about the way that that was actually caused by a bad deployment. And one of the things we've been trying to do in SQL Monitor is to provide more context around the sorts of problems that you might see. Now, a lot of developers and DBAs alike are using Redgate's database DevOps solution to make their changes to production more easily and reliably. But in the case you described, where the underlying change itself was bad, it doesn't matter how slick your deployment process was, you're still fundamentally ending up deploying a bad change. So I'm guessing that when you made that change, you ended up, so when you were investigating that problem, I'm imagining you ended up looking at a whole host of different possible causes for that. In the new version of SQL Monitor, what we actually have here on the timeline is automatic annotations about deployments that have occurred using Redgate's database DevOps solution. So that as soon as you're looking at any of this information, you just have it put straight in front of you, this information that a deployment happened at that moment in time. And that means that instead of spending half an hour down a whole different set of avenues of exploration, you just know instantly, I need to go and speak to James, because it looks like James is responsible for this whole mess in the first place. And you can much more quickly resolve that issue. So there is actually one more thing I'd love to show you, which is to do with deadlocks, another common cause of issues that we investigate all the time. So SQL Monitor's always told you about deadlocks that happen, but deadlocks are really difficult to diagnose sometimes. I mean, this is the sort of information that you can look at in its rawest form. In the latest version of SQL Monitor, we're actually able to show you that information as a deadlock graph right here in the browser. So it doesn't matter if you're skiing down a mountain somewhere and you want to take a break to quickly look at this. You can do that right on your mobile phone. But you've got this kind of visualization right here. You can click on these processes and see more detailed information about them. But it's part of that ability to much more quickly understand and get to the bottom of these problems without having to jump out into separate places. You've got all the information that you need and backed up by the visualizations you need right there inside SQL Monitor.
Wow, there's a lot here, and but I do have a question. This is not just about problems that are happening now, is it?
That's true, and I mean that's part of the value of all of this, which is that so often problems happen, and by the time that we try and go and diagnose what caused it, that problem isn't happening anymore, and it's auto-magically fixed itself somehow. And this happens, and the temptation sometimes is to say, well, the problem's gone away, maybe I'll just leave that be. But a really great DBA is going to want to know what is the actual cause behind that. So sometimes that problem's going to go away and it's never going to come back, and that's really great. But sometimes this is really just a symptom of a greater underlying concern that you need to be going and investigating. Now you can use other capabilities like running your own DMV queries. You can use Activity Monitor. And these tools are great at showing you what's going on now, but when you need to go look in the past and understand both these historical patterns and just data that doesn't exist anymore by running DMV queries, that's when the value of a monitoring tool is really powerful.
Yeah, what I really hate is when someone reboots the server while you're out at lunch, and then all that DMV information, all that collected information is gone.
Yeah.
So,
Not good.
yeah, it's not good. These tools look amazing. But I've had a couple of my consulting customers who are not sure about whether it will work in their environment, because they have hundreds of SQL Server instances and they're spread out geographically across the world, and they're kind of worried about performance and even security. How is this going to work?
So we were actually just chatting about this earlier, and it's a really important point. So when you're dealing with a small environment, whenever you've got a handful of servers in one network, monitoring is a pretty easy thing to manage and to set up. You just install it somewhere, you point it at your instances, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
But the modern DBA is often having to deal with much more complex environments, either when you're managing SQL Server instances that are spread across different securely isolated networks that don't easily see each other, or when you have global businesses where data centers are spread out around the world, but you have DBAs who are responsible for managing performance across all of those different time zones, across different data centers. And that can be quite painful. Let me switch back to these slides. So, so you might have responsibility for 3 different data centers, and the typical approach might have been to create a single instance of a monitoring solution and just monitor all of your instances from that place. And that works to a point, but it comes with some real problems. So you need to create some essentially holes in your firewall. You need to open several ports to allow access to each of these SQL Server instances. It comes with concerns around networking capabilities. So the latency between London and New York is pretty hard limited by the speed of light. You're not going to do very much better than that. And bandwidth also gets expensive over the internet. And you can work around some of these issues, right? So you can work with your network team, you can set up VPNs, and you can open these ports, and it's not an insurmountable problem, but it comes with real pain around connectivity and setup. So what a lot of people do instead is use a different approach where they have a separate monitoring environment for each of their data centers or each of their networks. And that resolves a lot of the pain. So you have a high bandwidth, low latency connection into each of your data centers. You remove this problem that you were essentially just monitoring the quality of network connectivity between your monitoring solution and your SQL Server instances. Security becomes much more manageable. It's less painful to set up. But you have this big new problem, which is now you've got 3 totally separate places to go look at if you have any kind of issue to diagnose, or if you just want to see how your estate is doing. And that kind of isolated view of the world is very much at odds with how the modern DBA wants to approach things. You're responsible for the entire health of your environment, not just for a network or for a data center. So the new capability is a new way of architecting SQL Monitor. So we think of this as a best of breeds approach. So in this approach, you retain the idea of a monitoring installation inside each network, so you get that high bandwidth, low latency, ease of configuration setup. But then all of that data can easily be consolidated up to a single user interface, so that when you're looking at reports or when you're looking at any analysis, even the global overview screen or any alerts, all of those are done in a seamlessly combined way. So you have a single pane of glass that lets you understand the health of your entire environment rather than that kind of segregated view. And we think that for the DBA who's managing dozens, hundreds of servers, that kind of approach is much more in line with the view of the world that they need to be taking.
Yeah, you know, in a perfect world, database administrators could be spending their time on project work and DevOps and not fighting fires all day and not taking care of just drive-by requests. And there are probably two keys to accomplishing this. So number one, you know, automation. Automation's your best friend. It's not being a lazy DBA, it's being a smart DBA. In fact, sometimes you might even work with some developers to set up some self-service applications for the help desk so that less requests end up, you know, making it to the DBA team that could be handled by someone else without giving them access like to the whole database. Probably the second key is, you know, having monitoring in place so you know what's going on, you know what you're going to deal with, and obviously you don't have to write 1,000 scripts to come up with this. So, you know, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and we saw today some of the newest capabilities of SQL Monitor that you can leverage to get some of those benefits. And there are a huge number of other capabilities that already exist in the tool. This version 8 is currently in beta or beta, should I say?
Either one.
So you can take part in that if you like by emailing SQL Monitor at redgate.com. The address is just here on the screen. And we're happy to get you on that program on Monday when we're going to be releasing those first beta versions of the tool. So we have just a few moments for any questions. If you do have any questions for us, please just tweet those to us using hashtag SQLinthecity, and someone is going to show us some questions as they come in.
Here's one. Mindy asks, how are alerts in the group inbox organized? I know the answer to that one.
Okay, you go.
Yeah, so they're first organized by server, and then they're organized by type of alert. And that's fine for most of the alerts, but then when you get to, for example, long-running queries or jobs that have failed, well then it's a little bit more granular. So that particular query, all of those will be grouped together, or the particular job that failed, that they'll be grouped together. So I think it's perfect.
Cool.
Bob asks, with distributed monitoring, do I need extra monitor licenses for each location as well as the servers?
Oh, I see. No, so the way that SQL Monitor is licensed is based on the number of servers that you monitor overall. So we actually don't care whether you have 10 different base monitors. There's no additional charge for the base monitoring setup. So if you have, you could have 20 different networks with 100 servers between them, but you pay for the licenses for the 100 servers. That's how it's done. So it's, cool. There's no extra cost there.
We have a question from Kate. What other ways can we receive alerts?
Can we receive alerts?
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. So we only actually looked at those alerts in that grouped inbox earlier. So you can also receive email notifications of those alerts, of course, and you can configure that pretty granularly to work out who gets what types of alerts when. You can post those to Slack automatically. That's integrated into SQL Monitor. We can also integrate using SNMP traps into various other systems, as well as we have integrations into things like PagerDuty, so that you can treat SQL Monitor's alerts as a mechanism for raising incidents in other systems. So that as an example, we speak to people who use SCOM as something that they're kind of forced to use as an enterprise-wide monitoring platform, but it's something that doesn't give the DBA enough information, and so they use SQL Monitor. But they pipe those alerts into SCOM's incident escalation systems so that they're able to be in line with what the rest of the organization is doing around that kind of incident management.
Cool.
More? I don't see any other questions. So I guess all that remains to say is thanks so much for attending the session, and for those of you who've been with us all day and seen some of the awesome other sessions, really appreciate you spending the time with us. The recordings of this are going to be available, so thanks again. Look forward to chatting in the future.